um, Judges tonight. We are going to, I'm intending at least to finish up the book tonight with the sort of the epilogue to this terrible story in chapter 19 about the Levite and his concubine who and the terrible things that were done to her and the response to that and how it plays out then in the nation as a whole. How did we end with the story of the Levite and his concubine in chapter 19? How does that part of the story end?
For Israel to do something about what happened to the lady, the concubine.
Israel gets the tribes get a grisly invitation in the mail, pieces of the concubine sent to each tribe as you put it, Alan, as a call to arms, a rally for Israel to do something. We end chapter 19 with such a thing has never been done. Not since the day the Israelites came up out of Egypt. Just imagine we must do something, so speak up. And so we get to chapter 20 here. Then all Israel from Dan to Beersheba and from the land of Gilead came together as one and assembled before the Lord in Mizpah. They all come together. Everybody comes together in this assembly. Remember, Israel is not one kingdom. They are a confederation of tribes, and sometimes a very loose confederation of tribes at best. But this has sort of galvanized them into this sort of united action. You might remember that in some of the battles, some of the fighting, not all of in fact, in most cases, it's just a couple of tribes who do the fighting in particular locations because they're the ones most affected. But here, all of Israel comes together for the first time, really, in Judges at least, since the very beginning of the book, when all of Israel is sent out to conquer the promised land. So they come together, not Benjamin, not the tribe of Benjamin, of course, because Gibeah is in Benjamin, and this is the problem. Verse 2, then the leaders of all the people of the tribes of Israel took their place in the assembly of God's people, 400,000 men armed with swords. A lot of commentators point out that seems like a huge number for an army. I don't have the expertise to say that one way or the other, but it seems like a very large army. Verse 3, then the Benjamites heard that the Israelites had gone up to Mizpah. Then the Israelites said, tell us how this awful thing happened. So the Levite, the husband of the murdered woman, said, I and my concubine came to Gibeah in Benjamin to spend the night. During the night, the men of Gibeah came after me and surrounded the house, intending to kill me. They raped my concubine, and she died. I took my concubine, cut her into pieces, and sent one piece to each region of Israel's inheritance, because they'd committed this lewd and outrageous act in Israel. Now, all you Israelites, speak up and tell me what you have decided to do. What do you think of the accuracy of his story?
It's not.
It's not accurate. In what ways is it not accurate?
Because he gave her over to those men.
All right. He does not mention
Yeah.
He
right
out the door there, right? He just says they did this terrible thing. He really sort of minimizes his own actions and doesn't mention his own actions and sort of his summary makes it sort of appear that he is without blame in this or without part in this. And I don't think we're supposed to just assume that. I think we are supposed to feel like he's done something wrong. And I think he thinks he's done something wrong because He doesn't mention it, right? I mean, you don't skip the parts that make you look good. You skip the parts that make you look bad, and I
Right.
think that's kind of what's happening here. Um,
And you know what, Patrick, I was thinking, it seems to me that that wasn't a hard thing for him to do. It was like women just didn't mean a lot back then.
she certainly does not seem to mean a lot to him, other than as a I mean, she means enough to him that he goes and tracks her down, right, from her father's house, and wants to bring her back. Um,
Mhm.
but you kind of, as you sort of see the dynamic there, you sort of you sort of understand why she left, maybe. You sort of have a sense of maybe why she left in the first place. Um, and certainly his actions, remember, after the terrible thing happens to her, is done to her, and she is laying there on the outside the door. His actions toward her are extremely callous and cold and cruel.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I think we're supposed to see this. This is not a guy who, he's not a paragon of virtue here. We're not supposed to be looking at him as a good example for our own character. But he tells the story, the version of it, and says, "Speak up and tell me what you've decided to do." So this meeting is a way for Israel to come together and agree on, what are we going to do about this? To their credit, the nation kind of says we can't just pass this over. This is not just something that we can ignore. Um, this is something that has to be addressed. Um, all the men rose up together as one, saying, "None of us will go home. No, not one of us will return to his house. But now this is what we'll do to Gibeah. We'll go up against it in the order decided by casting lots. We'll take 10 men out of every 100 from all the tribes of Israel, and 100 from 1,000, and 1,000 from 10,000 to get provisions for the army. Then, when the army arrives at Gibeah and Benjamin, it can give them what they deserve for this outrageous act done in Israel." So all the Israelites got together and united as one against the city. Notice the outrageous act done in Israel, and that's kind of the point here. This is an offense against the community, right? This is not just an offense against one person, one woman, or one man. This is an offense against Israel, against the covenant, against the people of God, as a group, and so as a group they feel the need to deal with it. So they make arrangements for their supply lines and their provisions, and united as one, they are going to attack Benjamin, attack Gibeah. They're making preparations to do so, at least. It's interesting, isn't it, that what's united them is this outrage. They have not been exactly united throughout the book of Judges, but this outrage sort of galvanizes them and brings them together, at least for a while. The tribes of Israel sent messengers throughout the tribe of Benjamin, saying, "What about this awful crime that was committed among you? Now turn those wicked men of Gibeah over to us, so that we may put them to death and purge the evil from Israel." So they're giving them an opportunity, right? I think that's really important to point out. They send messengers throughout Benjamin saying, this terrible thing has been done. Turn over the men responsible for it so we can punish them. But the Benjamites would not listen to their fellow Israelites. From their towns, they came together at Gibeah to fight against the Israelites. At once, the Benjamites mobilized 26,000 swordsmen from their towns, in addition to 700 able young men from those living in Gibeah. Among all these soldiers, there were 700 select troops who were left-handed, each of whom could sling a stone at a hare and not miss.
Hmm.
That seemed to have been that also, there's a reference to similar think it's in the days of David. There's a reference to similar young men who could sling a stone at a hair and not miss. And I think they were left-handed too. So I don't know exactly what the left-handedness has to do with it. Ehud, you remember, is left-handed, and so and in his case, it was a sword that he used, right? And the left-handedness let him be kind of sly with where he kept his sword. Um, I'm not sure what the left-handedness has to do with. Maybe it's like a left-handed pitcher versus a right-handed batter. I don't know. There's a natural advantage somehow. But in any case, maybe that's true because let's see, the shield would be maybe it gives you a better angle with a person's shield. I don't know. But in any case, they have this skill with slings. They're obviously very accurate with their slings, and so in addition to the soldiers, they've got artillery, right? They've got snipers, sharpshooters who can stand off from the fighting and start picking people off, and that's quite an advantage, I suppose, in a war that's mainly just people bashing into each other with heavy weapons. So Benjamin refuses. They won't listen. They won't turn over the guilty parties. Israel, apart from Benjamin, mustered 400,000 swordsmen, all of them fit for battle. The Israelites went up to Bethel and inquired of God. They said, "Who of us is to go up first to fight against the Benjamites?" So they go to Bethel. They go to the what we'll discover. They go to that's where the Ark of the Covenant is. They go to Bethel and they take the time to go to Bethel to inquire of God in this matter. Who of us is to go up first? That sounds like something we've seen. Do you remember a similar question in Judges? Who's going to go? Who's going to fight? Who's going to lead the charge? Early on in the first chapter, I think, of Judges, talking about going out and conquering the promised land. Who's going to go first? Who's first to begin this war? And in that case, it's Judah, and in this case, it's Judah. The Lord replied, "Judah shall go first." The next morning, the Israelites got up and pitched camp near Gibeah. The Israelites went out to fight the Benjamites and took up battle positions against them at Gibeah. The Benjamites came out of Gibeah and cut down 22,000 Israelites on the battlefield that day. But the Israelites encouraged one another and again took up their positions where they had stationed themselves the first day. The Israelites went up and wept before the Lord until evening, and they inquired of the Lord and said, "Shall we go up again to fight against the Benjamites, our fellow Israelites?" The Lord answered, "Go up against them." Are they having second thoughts? Perhaps. They have had a terrible first day of fighting. They kind of retreat back to their original positions, and then they go back to God and they say, "Should we go fight against our fellow?" This time, the Benjamites are our fellow Israelites. Are they having a little bit of regret? But the Lord answered, "Go up against them." Then the Israelites drew near to Benjamin the second day. This time, when the Benjamites came out from Gibeah to oppose them, they cut down another 18,000 Israelites, all of them armed with swords. So the second day goes a little bit better. They don't lose 22,000; they lose 18,000. So that's a better outcome, right? But still not exactly what they were looking for, I suppose. Then all the Israelites, the whole army, went up to Bethel, and there they sat weeping before the Lord. They fasted that day until evening and presented burnt offerings and fellowship offerings to the Lord. And the Israelites inquired of the Lord. In those days, the Ark of the Covenant was there, with Phinehas, son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, ministering before it. That gives us a little bit of a time frame here. There is another Phinehas that we know about. Actually, there are a couple of other Phinehas's, but this one is specified as Phinehas, son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron. So I think we're looking at, Aaron's grandson, who's ministering here at the tabernacle, at the Ark of the Covenant in Bethel. which gives us a little time frame, at least for this particular event. That's not to say that all of Judges happened that close to the actual entrance into the Promised Land, but in this we haven't gotten too far. At least in time, we haven't gotten too far. We've gotten a long way from the intentionality of Israel as they entered the land to take the Promised Land, to be God's people, to be separate from the Canaanites and the other inhabitants of the land. But anyway, Phineas seems to be the one who is serving there at the tabernacle when they go up to inquire of God one last time. This time they go, it's the whole army, and they go and with their fasting and their offering sacrifices and the whole works, right? And asking, do we, shall we go up to fight against the Benjamites, our fellow Israelites, or not? See, they've had twice they've inquired of God. The message they've gotten is go fight, and twice they have lost badly. And so this third time they're kind of saying, are you sure? God, are you sure that we should do this? Is this what you want us to do? And God responds, go, for tomorrow I'll give them into your hands. Then Israel set an ambush around Gibeah. Let's pause for a minute, though, and let me ask you, why do you think God tells them to go fight twice, and then twice allows them to be beaten badly, to lose 40,000 soldiers, half of their, or not half, a tenth of their total army, according to the numbers in Judges? Why does God let that happen? Does that bother
Is he
anybody?
testing them? Is he
How-
testing it? Maybe testing them?
Testing them?
They'll
And then God.
do what he says.
All right. Are you going to do what I say? Are you going to, are you going to follow me? Are you going to obey me or not? Even when it's going badly, are you going to obey me? Are you going to do what I tell you? Dan suggests humbling them by losing some soldiers. Gideon comes to mind as a rough parallel, but with Gideon, it wasn't nearly this awful, right? I mean, Gideon, they just sent a bunch of guys home. It's not people getting killed. It's God weeds down the army because he doesn't want it to be about them. He wants it to be about him. But this seems awfully harsh and doesn't weed the army down by nearly as much as it did for Gideon.
Maybe it's a test.
Test,
No, for
as
testing.
as Diana said, a test.
Different times, different people.
One thing
Well,
that
they had been so disobedient until maybe it was punishment.
Yeah, so that came to my mind too, is it that they're not exactly blameless in all of this? Is it that, maybe there's enough sin here to go around, and is there some sort of punishment for all of Israel that sort of involved in this, that you're not gonna get through this without some pain and without some suffering over the things that have been done. And so maybe that's what's going on here. We're not told. It's sheer speculation to even bring it up,
Right.
but it's really interesting and kind of in some ways a little troubling that that twice they go and ask God, should we do this? And twice God says, yeah, go ahead, and then a bunch of people die. That's kind of hard for me to get my mind around a little bit. And it's not typical. I mean, in the other stories we have in Scripture, that Israel goes and inquires of God, what shall we do? God says, I'll give them to you. And then there's like, the sun stands still in the sky, or the rain comes and soaks the ground, and the chariots can't operate, or there's God does something, and it's a resounding victory. They march around and the walls fall. I mean, it's a resounding victory. And here it's just more and more bloodshed.
They're also,
Yeah.
They're fighting themselves. Yeah, yeah.
which is odd that God chose cousins to take care of cousins.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's right. They are. They're fighting themselves. It's which just sort of even to me increases the oddness of it. It's not, it's they're they're fighting one another, and there's this great deal of bloodshed that's taking place now. It also illustrates, I think, on some level, the way that violence just feeds on itself and snowballs and becomes, this just sort of a just sort of the way things are. It becomes just the norm,
Mhm.
and seems to be here just continuing. The continuing violence is just unavoidable. But this time God promises, tomorrow I will give them into your hands. He hasn't said that before. Then Israel set an ambush around Gibeah. They went up against the Benjamites on the third day and took up positions against Gibeah, as they had done before. The Benjamites came out to meet them and were drawn away from the city. They began to inflict casualties on the Israelites as before, so that about 30 men fell in the open field and on the roads, the one leading to Bethel and the other to Gibeah. While the Benjamites were saying, we're defeating them as before, the Israelites were saying, let's retreat and draw them away from the city to the roads. All the men of Israel moved from their places and took up positions at Baal Tamar, and the Israelite ambush charged out of its place on the west of Gibeah. Then 10,000 of Israel's able young men made a frontal attack on Gibeah. The fighting was so heavy that the Benjamites did not realize how near disaster was. The Lord defeated Benjamin before Israel, and on that day the Israelites struck down 25,100 Benjamites, all armed with swords. Then the Benjamites saw that they were beaten. Now the men of Israel had given way before Benjamin because they relied on the ambush they had set near Gibeah. Those who had been in ambush made a sudden dash into Gibeah, spread out, and put the whole city to the sword. The Israelites had arranged with the ambush that they should send up a great cloud of smoke from the city, and then the Israelites would counterattack. The Benjamites had begun to inflict casualties on the Israelites, about 30, and they said, we're defeating them as in the first battle. A column of smoke began to rise from the city. The Benjamites turned and saw the whole city going up in smoke. Then the Israelites counterattacked, and the Benjamites were terrified because they realized that disaster had come on them. So they fled before the Israelites in the direction of the wilderness, but they could not escape the battle. And the Israelites who came out of the towns cut them down there. They surrounded the Benjamites, chased them, and easily overran them in the vicinity of Gibeah on the east. 18,000 Benjamites fell, all of them valiant fighters. As they turned and fled toward the wilderness to the rock of Rimmon, the Israelites cut down 5,000 men along the roads. They kept pressing after the Benjamites as far as Gidom and struck down 2,000 more. On that day, 25,000 Benjamite swordsmen fell, all of them valiant fighters. 600 of them turned and fled into the wilderness to the rock of Rimmon, where they stayed 4 months. The men of Israel went back to Benjamin and put all the towns to the sword, including the animals and everything else they found. All the towns they came across, they set on fire. So that's a whole lot, but let's just make sure we're all on the same page here. It seems like what happens is the battle starts. There's the fight going on. The Benjamites are feeling good about it again. These Israelites are terrible. We're beating them easily, just like we did the first couple of days. But this time they've pulled away a detachment. The detachment goes into the city of Gibeah, puts Gibeah to the sword, and the signal that they've taken the city is this smoke that's rising. And when the Israelites see that, they fight back, and the Benjamites realize what's happened, and that they're trapped, and that they've got nowhere to retreat to, and they try to flee, and eventually are cut down, almost all of them. Questions or anything on that? That's just sort of the tactics of the battle. It's kind of interesting, but I don't know that it's all that helpful to us. It's just sort of a way of talking about the tactics. The important thing is the line, I think, in it says the Lord defeated them. Let's see, where is that? Yeah, from 35. The Lord defeated Benjamin before Israel. It's an interesting way to describe it, right? It's not that Israel defeated them, it's the Lord defeated them before Israel. So it's sort of it emphasizes that God is present in this. And I don't know if that's comforting or troubling in this particular situation, that God is the one who does the defeating, except to say, I think we are to understand that God wanted Gibeah dealt with, that the things that had been done and that were accepted and justified by the rest of Benjamin were not things that could be accepted and justified. And so God does want something like this to happen, to drive home the depth of this depravity. Comments or questions on this part of it? You don't really know who to root for, right? There's really nobody here to root for exactly. But it seems like it's described as this sort of series of events that follows almost inevitably from what happened at Gibeah to think about, what are some decisions that could have been made? What are some things that could have been done differently to avoid all of this?
They could have turned over the worthless men.
There's an easy one, right? They could have turned them over. When messages went out, they could have turned over the people responsible.
Yeah.
People who did it, maybe the people who allowed it to happen, could have turned them over. What are some other decisions that could have been made differently? Well, the guy doesn't give his concubine to the crowd, right? There's a decision that could have been made differently. Guy doesn't do that. They stay with her father another day, but and then, or they don't stay so long that day and they leave earlier and they don't have to spend the night in Gibeah at all. There's a thought.
He just doesn't have a concubine.
Or he doesn't have a concubine. Yeah. So I mean, several places somebody could have said, "Whoa, let's consider this more deeply," and it doesn't happen. And it just sort of escalates from there. It just gets worse and worse. Until by the end, you have all of the towns in Benjamin apparently on fire. I mean, that's the scene that you have at the end. All of the towns in Benjamin are burning, and all of the people are dead, and the animals are dead. It's all just leveled. It's all just destroyed. And yeah, it's sad. The only way to describe it is it's sad and it's awful and it's a terrible story, a terrible, terrible story that's not going to get any better in chapter 21, I'm afraid. So other comments or thoughts on chapter 20, and then we'll get to 21.
They totally forgot the Ten Commandments, of course.
Yeah. So I
Love
mean,
their neighbor.
yeah, yeah,
Love God.
yeah.
It just went out the window.
Yeah. I mean, clearly there's a lot of commandments being broken here. There's in this story, these stories. So chapter 21 then. The men of Israel had taken an oath at Mizpah. Not one of us will give his daughter in marriage to a Benjamite. So they rewind quickly to this assembly they had at Mizpah after everybody had received their portion of the concubine. And they, at this assembly, they had said, we're not going to give our daughters in marriage to the Benjamites. They've basically broken from Benjamin, right? They've basically said Benjamin's out of the covenant. They're out of the people. They're not part of the people of Israel anymore. We're not supposed to give our daughters in marriage to the Canaanites. They certainly have done so, but we're not supposed to. And we're not going to do it. We're not going to give our daughters to the Benjamites either. So it's this sort of clean break. They're not part of the people of God anymore, according to them. The people went to Bethel, where they sat before God until evening, raising their voices and weeping bitterly. Lord God of Israel, they cried, why has this happened to Israel? Why should one tribe be missing from Israel today? So gather at Bethel after all this is over, and now they're full of regret, right? They're full of regret. I don't know. I mean, I think it's kind of natural that you would be at this point in time, right? You've done what you thought had to be done. You've done what you thought God wanted you to do, but there's still this regret. And it's even, they ask God, right? God, why has this happened? Well, we know why. Why has it happened? Let's answer the question. Why has it happened?
Man's depravity.
Okay, depravity.
That's a big part of all this whole book here. It's all about depravity as they're falling apart.
Okay. Depravity, sin, animalistic behavior, violence. That's why it's happened. Whether it was justified or not, whether God was behind all of it or part of it or what, that's why it's happened. And to some degree, at least, I guess we have to see it as a justified response because of God's involvement. It's striking. I mean, for us, it probably seems all out of proportion, right? I mean, in our world, we have the proportional response idea, right? They do something to us, we strike them in a proportional way. You don't burn a city because of a terrorist act, right? It's surgical strikes. It's a proportional response.
I wonder if they regretted showing up with 400,000.
Yeah.
And thought, well, maybe there was some diplomacy a little bit more that we could have applied instead of just asking them once. Or maybe had them take care of those men or something.
Yeah. I mean, you wonder if there isn't at least some sense of, boy, that went badly. we handled that as badly as we possibly could. And I mean, again, at the end of it, we've got all the cities in the tribe of Benjamin on fire. It's terrible. It's a catastrophe. It's a cataclysm. And yeah, maybe there's some regret. Maybe, one thing that we haven't mentioned, but that enters my mind, does God let them sort of do what they want to do? Does God let them, have their head of steam here and do what they want? Is it perhaps are those first two battles that went so badly, was it God trying to help them come to some other sort of conclusion? Though that's not the way it's really pictured, right? Because again, they asked God 3 times, and 3 times He says, "Go up." But
Well, Patrick,
yeah,
I kind of think about women, children, old people were left back. And they were the ones that burn up in those towns that were killed. And it's like Israel doesn't want marriage between their daughters and the males that's left. So therefore, they can't build a tribe up, without a woman.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. That's exactly what they're doing. They're basically cutting Benjamin out of Israel's future, because whoever might be left scattered among the tribes, can't rebuild the inheritance of Benjamin. Yeah. Um, so it feels like they realized that at some point, whether this was, whether God wanted us to do some of this or not, at some point, maybe we went too far. We made this oath. We put everybody to the sword. Generally in the Bible, when God wants a town put to the sword, when God wants, sometimes he does. Sometimes he says, leave no one alive, leave nothing alive. It's a holy war kind of situation, but it's God who says that. We never see God saying that
No.
in these stories. We never see God saying, all right, when you finish with them, go wipe out all the cities. That seems to be something that is maybe the momentum of the war sort of carries them into that kind of behavior. I don't know. A lot of it is left ambiguous. We're just not sure, but they certainly are regretting it. So early the next day, the people built an altar and presented burnt offerings and fellowship offerings. Then the Israelites asked, who from all the tribes of Israel has failed to assemble before the Lord? For they had taken a solemn oath that anyone who failed to assemble before the Lord at Mizpah was to be put to death. We got another oath here. We've had the oath that, if we're not going to give our daughters to the Benjamites, now there's this other oath. And the other oath is that they apparently had made at Mizpah at this gathering. The other oath had been, if somebody doesn't assemble, we're going to put them to death. So two pretty extreme oaths here have been made. It reminds you of, previously with Jephthah with the daughter. His name left me. Jephthah with the daughter who made this sort of extreme oath and wound up having to do something to her. So two very extreme oaths again that we don't see God asking for. And in fact, God's oaths are a tricky thing. Jesus said, you recall, don't make an oath. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. Why? Probably because of situations like this, that sometimes we make these silly oaths that we think are going to be, so important and so portentous, and they wind up just backfiring on us. So, in any case, a second oath has been made, and that's real convenient now because they discover that that one town did not send anybody to the gathering at Mizpah. Verse 6 of chapter 21. Now the Israelites grieve for the tribe of Benjamin, their fellow Israelites. Today, one tribe is cut off from Israel. They said, how can we provide wives for those who are left, since we have taken an oath by the Lord not to give them any of our daughters in marriage? Then they asked, which one of the tribes of Israel failed to assemble before the Lord at Mizpah? And they discovered that no one from Jabesh Gilead had come to the camp for the assembly, for when they counted the people, they found that none of the people of Jabesh Gilead were here. By the way, there's a lot of repetition in this story, which I think is kind of interesting. It really serves to emphasize and sort of heighten some of the significance. And so we're sort of stuck here for a few verses on this idea that somebody didn't show up, and it was people from it was no representatives from the people of Jabesh Gilead. So that's helpful, because we've got this other problem that our other oath has caused. And maybe one of our oaths is going to solve the other one. So the assembly sent 12,000 fighting men with instructions to go to Jabesh Gilead and put to the sword those living there, including the women and children. That strike you as odd, anyone? I hope it strikes you as odd. It's a strange thing, right? And again, we don't see any reason, any evidence that God has suggested this. That this is seemingly all Israel coming up with this solution to a problem that they had caused.
Yeah,
Um, if I was a cynical person, I might say that's what politicians do. They come up with solutions to problems they solve. But surely I'm not that cynical. So we'll just maybe stick to the text here. But so they send this detachment of 12,000 people to the town to put to the sword everybody living there, except this is what you're to do: kill every male and every woman who is not a virgin. They found among the people living in Jabesh Gilead 400 young women who had never slept with a man, and they took them to the camp at Shiloh in Canaan. And the thing that occurs to me is, you know, I wonder how many people were saying, "Oh, I am. I never have." Well, not me. But anyway, so that's they kill everybody in the town except for these 400 virgins. Then the whole assembly sent an offering, sent an offer of peace to the Benjamites at the rock of Rimmon. So the Benjamites returned at that time and were given the women of Jabesh Gilead who had been spared, but there were not enough for all of them. Do you notice something here odd?
Just one
Just
thing.
one thing. The odd thing,
it's,
speaking of specifically, is this all started with a woman who, against her will, is given to a bunch of men.
hmm
And we come back around to 400 women against their will given to a bunch of men.
yeah. And not only that, Patrick, they had a gall to want virgins.
Well,
And
guess-
they want
yeah,
everything that's clean
yeah.
after all this killing.
I guess the virginity thing, it has to do also with, we need to, the concern in Israel was, who making sure that offspring were really your offspring, so to have virgins becomes important, like for marriage in most cases.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, come on. The whole thing is kind of, the whole thing is nuts. Um,
Mhm.
we made this oath. We can't break our oath, so let's go kill a bunch of people, and that'll solve it. That'll solve. By the way, there are things you can do in the old law if you make an oath that is reckless. There are, you can atone for that. You can, you don't have to just, it's all or nothing. But they're trying to solve this problem they've created, and so this is what they do.
What do we know about the place or the people Jabesh Gilead?
It's a town called Jabesh in Gilead. Gilead, but I don't know what we know about him other than that. I'm not sure I know anything about him other than that, but maybe somebody does. We could probably Google Jabesh Gilead and figure it out. But I don't think there's anything specific. If you're asking, is there anything particularly striking about the people of Jabesh Gilead? Not that I know of in Scripture.
I think later they come and recover the body of King Saul after he's killed in battle. I think it was
Search Jabesh
But
Gilead there.
They should have sent one person.
Yeah, they sent one guy. Maybe all this wouldn't happen. You get the sense that they're going to make something like this happen one way or the other, to solve this problem. The people grieved for Gilead, grieved for Benjamin, because the Lord had made a gap in the tribes of Israel. Well, isn't that typical? We, blame God when it's, when God's probably the least of the responsible parties. God's involved in this, no doubt, and that's hard to sort of get our minds around sometimes. But I mean, it's not God who's been the cause of all these things that have happened. at the very least, that minimizes the human responsibility in it. The elders of the assembly said, with the women of Benjamin destroyed, how shall we provide wives for the men who are left? The Benjamite survivors must have heirs, they said, so that the tribe of Israel will not be wiped out. We can't give them our daughters as wives, since we Israelites have taken this oath. Cursed be anyone who gives a wife to a Benjamite. But look, there is the annual festival of the Lord in Shiloh, which lies north of Bethel, east of the road that goes from Bethel to Shechem and south to Lebonah. So they instructed the Benjamites, saying, go and hide in the vineyards and watch. When the young women of Shiloh come out to join in the dancing, rush from the vineyards, and each of you seize one of them to be your wife. Then return to the land of Benjamin. When their fathers or brothers complain to us, we will say to them, do us the favor of helping them, because we did not get wives for them during the war. You will not be guilty of breaking your oath, because you did not give your daughters to them.
Well, you put the idea in their head.
I mean, I don't know what you could say about this. I mean, it's awful, and it's again, we have a problem that begins with a woman with no power being given over to a group of men, and we're ending with a bunch of women with no power being given over to a group of men. It's terrible. It's awful.
It shows the mentality of the time.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly the point, right?
Class citizen,
It's exactly the point.
maybe fourth or fifth.
So that's what the Benjamites did. While the young women were dancing, each man caught one and carried her off to be his wife. Then they returned to their inheritance and rebuilt the towns and settled in them, and they all lived happily ever after. No, that's not the way this book ends. They all lived happily ever after. At that time, the Israelites left their place and went home to their tribes and clans, each to his own inheritance. In those days, Israel had no king. Everyone did as they saw fit. So the book ends with that refrain that we've seen several times in these last two chapters, the last 4 chapters, of there's no king and everyone does as they see fit. And if that doesn't describe Judges pretty well, not much does. What do you think of the way the book ends? What do you think of the way we're left in this book?
What's hanging?
We are left hanging. Think that's intentional? I think it's very intentional. I think Judges leaves us hanging because Judges is part of the story. For the author of Judges, I think, or the editors, or however you describe who's responsible for the text that we have, I think the Judges is the first part of the story that's finished by Samuel and Kings. Because for the Judges, in Judges, the idea that there could be a king that could keep Israel together, keep them unified, and insist upon the keeping of God's law, that seems like, utopia, right? That seems like, oh man, wouldn't that be great? And so I think the idea is that Judges is sort of setting us up for Samuel and Kings and the development of a monarchy, particularly King David, as sort of the ideal. Now, we know the kings of Israel weren't ideal, right? We know that none of them were great all the time, and a lot of them weren't great most of the time. But the ideal of a godly king is, I think, sort of hanging out there at the end of Judges, a deliverer, right? Somebody who can really deliver Israel from themselves. What we wind up with at the end of Judges is Israel's biggest problem is not just the people around them, it's them, right? They're their biggest problem. And that's true for all of us, right? The problem is not out there. The problem is in here. And so I think the hope is that finally there'll be a deliverer sometime. God's going to raise up a king who will save his people, who will rescue his people, which, by the way, is what Christians believe too, right? We just have a little
That's right.
take on it, a little different way of thinking about that deliverance. But that's what we hope for as well. And so I kind of think as you sort of end Judges, let it sort of take you to that hope that God will deliver us from violence and deliver us from the horrible things that human beings do to each other. And then, in fact, He's already in Christ delivered us from those things. And as His people, our job is to not go out and put cities to the sword if they don't do what we want. Our job is to go out and proclaim that deliverance, that God in Jesus has done what people way back in the time of Judges hoped that He would do one day.
We can learn by their bad examples again. Just like we talked about with Samson, certain people. There's a lot of bad examples in there.
Other comments? I got done 2 minutes early. Well, thank you very much for your thoughts and your great comments. I think Alan is going to take the class the next couple of weeks. That way,
No, that's next Wednesday.
it'll be
It's 2 weeks.
next 2 Wednesdays. Yes, I'll be probably home sometime the second Wednesday night, but if it'd be great if you wouldn't mind. So Alan will be covering class the next couple of weeks, and it will be up to him what we'll do. And then after that, after those next 2 weeks, if you have some thoughts about what you might like to study in this class, a book of the Bible or a subject or whatever, let me know. Love to have your thoughts. All right.
Okay. Thanks, Patrick.
But it is-
Thank you, guys.